Thanks for joining us for this special edition of KTVB News. I'm Joe Paris. This year, KTVB is marking 70 years in business as Idaho's very first television station. And you've likely seen the commercials running here on News Channel 7. We signed on July 12, 1953, but not as KTVB. Let us explain.
It all starts in 1928 at a radio station at Boise High School. Turns out they built up a pretty big operation called KFAU. So big, it became too expensive to operate. So the school district put it up for sale and put an ad in the paper. An ad Mr. Curtis Phillips and his wife Georgia happened to notice when they were visiting her parents in Parma. Curtis, who already co-owned a radio station in Eugene, put in the winning bid and became the owner of KFAU that same year. The couple moved to Boise to run the station and went on air November 5, 1928 under the call letters KIDO-AM. Over the years, they built up the station, gaining more and more power to broadcast farther and farther away. But in 1944, Curtis died of a heart attack, leaving Georgia as a widow with 2 young girls. She continued to run the station as a single mom until 1946. That's when she married R. Mowbray Davidson, a Boise businessman, and she officially became Georgia Davidson. In 1952, the FCC lifted its pause on new television stations, and Georgia filed for Idaho's very first TV station permit. A year later, on July 12, 1953, KIDO-TV went on the air for the very first time. The studio was located on Crestline Drive, just above the Boise Hills Village. Even the father of television, Philo Farnsworth himself, was in attendance for the sign-on. Legend goes, it was so hot that day, someone from the station went around to every store in Boise to buy every fan they could find to keep the machines cool. Those days, some commercials were advertised live in the studio. The studio even had a garage door for car dealerships to showcase their newest rides.
Fortunately, no bomb was found. Bowling, basketball, or ice skating, yes, you have the choice when you go Phillips 66.
By 1955, KIDO-TV had 7 on-air personalities and a number of original shows. In 1959, Georgia decided to sell the radio side of the business and change the television's call letters to KTVB. That same year, Bob Kruger was hired as the station's first general manager and vice president, and Sal Soleski, the station's first news director.
The real credit for the success of Channel 7, I believe, was Sal and Bob, because they laid the foundation. The rest of us just stood on their shoulders.
In 1971, KTVB opened its current building on Fairview Avenue, on what used to be the old Western Idaho Fairgrounds. 9 years later, in 1980, Georgia Davidson decided to sell KTVB to her friend Dorothy Bullitt, the owner of King Broadcasting in Seattle. Georgia would stay on, but with Bob Kruger running the station. In 1986, KTFT in Twin Falls begins operations under the KTVB News Group brand, expanding the station's reach from eastern Oregon almost to eastern Idaho. That coverage would explode again in 1996 with the launch of KTVB.com, now one of the most visited news websites in the entire state of Idaho. Georgia died a year later in 1997 at the age of 89, but her legacy lives on here at KTVB.
You just can't run from the Channel 7 legacy, and nor do you want to, because this is such a special place.
I'm so proud of this station, and I'm still proud of the station. I think it's still the gold standard.
I love this place, and the community loves this place. And you know, we always used to say a reputation is hard to build and it's easy to lose. And that weight is upon every generation that comes through the halls of this television station.
Still so much more to come here on this special edition celebrating KTVB's 70th anniversary, including more about the woman who started it all, Georgia Davidson, and how her influence continues to shape KTVB 70 years later. Plus the man whose name has become synonymous with Channel 7.
Channel 7 would not be what it is today without him.
We'll introduce you to former news director Sal Soleski and share why he was critical to KTVB's success.
I had the best job in the state of Idaho. I really did. To this day, I absolutely love this television station. I use an expression, the #1 image of a local television station is its local news. To this day, I feel very strong, if not stronger, about that.
There are dozens of people who have made KTVB successful over the years, but it all started with one woman, a name you likely wouldn't have heard outside of this building or this industry because she didn't enjoy the spotlight, but a name that is critical, important to the continued success of KTVB. Her name, Georgia Davidson.
I think she knew she had done an accomplishment, but she was never bragful. That's not her nature.
In a time when women were typically left at home to raise the family, Georgia Davidson bucked the trend.
Very compassionate, very kind. She had wonderful wisdom. She also had a wonderful sense of humor.
Georgia Marie Newport was born in May 1907 in Notus, Idaho. She went on to attend the University of Oregon. That's where she met her future husband, Curtis Phillips, affectionately known as Kiddo. During a trip to visit her parents in Idaho in 1928, they noticed an ad in the local newspaper. A radio station, KFAU, was up for sale. They placed a bid, won, and then moved to Boise to run it. KFAU eventually became KIDO. In 1942, Kiddo died of a heart attack, leaving Georgia a widow with 2 young girls.
She was a very happy woman, even with the sudden death of her first husband.
In 1946, she married Boise businessman R. Mowbray Davidson and became Georgia Davidson.
The two of them were a wonderful pair. They had a lot of fun. He always called her Mom.
And the grandkids called him Grandpa Mobe.
They loved each other dearly, as you can see in one of the photos. They just took pleasure in each other. They took pleasure in family. Family was important to both of them.
Georgia's granddaughter, Christy McEntee, says growing up she would spend a lot of time at their home on Warm Springs in Boise and remembers some odd visitors that, looking back, may have been pure coincidence.
They always had peacocks there, which was interesting. I mean, she didn't bring them in, they just were there, which is kind of funny when she joined NBC.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
In 1952, the freeze on new television stations across the country was lifted by the FCC, and Georgia filed to bring a station to Idaho. In 1953, that application was accepted, and KIDO-TV was born. On July 12th of that year, KIDO-TV went on the air for the very first time as an NBC affiliate. At NBC network meetings, Georgia would be one of the only women in the room of more than 120 men.
Women, at the table and kind of in those big rooms, if you think about what NBC was like at that time in the 50s, they were a couple of very few, if not the only, women that were really there and present.
She had wonderful support from the men in the community. They had a wonderful network, and they would bounce ideas off each other, and she was the only female in the group.
In 1956, Georgia hired a familiar face.
I went to work here August 13th, 1956, which was a Monday.
Her son-in-law, Bob Kruger.
In 1951, I married her daughter.
That daughter was Betty Davidson. Georgia and Bob met in McCall when Bob was working the boat docks at the Shore Lodge. In 1959, 3 years after Kruger was hired, Georgia called him into her office.
And she looked at me and she said, I've got to sell KIDO radio.
She really took on some big risks, and I have tremendous respect and admiration for that.
So Georgia sold KIDO AM to a man by the name of Bill Boeing Jr., the son of the founder of Boeing Aircraft. That same year, KIDO-TV changed its call letters to KTVB. Georgia, Bob, and the rest of KTVB then focused solely on running Idaho's first television station. Georgia soon went to part-time and began spending a lot of time outdoors. In 1971, KTVB moved to its current location on Fairview Avenue.
We had the dedication on her birthday in May of 1971.
KTVB became even more of a family affair when Christy came to work in the traffic department.
I do have to say, when I did start work here, God bless her, she said, "Don't you dare call me Grandma."
So she called her Gigi. Everyone else?
They called her Mrs. Davidson. No, that's part of her being proper. Yep. I mean, it was a very comfortable work environment, but you had your boundaries.
In 1980, Georgia decided to sell the station to Dorothy Bullitt, her friend who owned King Broadcasting in Seattle.
I think a big part of that was the admiration that they had for each other, the mutual respect, that they were both women well ahead of their time.
Georgia passed away in 1997 at the age of 89, but she paved the way for future generations of female leaders at KTVB.
To work at a station that really has had fantastic female leadership, and it even started with female leadership, right? Like, I was hired by a female news director when I don't think there were that many. And to be able to grow and be supported and be inspired is just not something that you get everywhere. And knowing it started with her just means a lot.
I think Georgia's legacy at Channel 7 is really that deep commitment and service to the community. That idea that we can be a part of what helps connect people, that we can really help bring people shared understanding, that we can help shine a light on things that maybe were in the shadows. That commitment to community has been a part of, News Channel 7 since day one. And I think that all started with Georgia.
Check this out. Larry Taylor, an anchor here from 1975 to 1980. He shared this photo with us and his memory of Georgia.
And we had that softball team called the Bad News Beats one season. And Larry Manili, I think, was kind of the spearhead, the starter of all that. And just about everybody in the newsroom was on the team. And just about everybody in the newsroom ended up with a broken bone. One guy had a dislocated eye socket. They had a collision out in center field. And pretty soon Georgia Davidson said, because people were off work, she said, no more softball. The Bad News Beats are gone.
Although some folks currently in our newsroom play on a softball team, and they often finished games bloodied and bruised because, it's a Channel 7 way. Well, after the break, we're going to introduce you to the man that pioneered so much here at KTVB, celebrating 70 years. For the most part, it's the anchors, reporters, meteorologists, and the sports guys you see here on Channel 7. But there are so many people who work behind the scenes to make everything happen. Editors, photographers, producers, directors, production assistants, and then there's the people in charge of the newsroom, the managing editor, executive producer, and the news director. And we've spoken to several former KTVB employees from over the last several decades ahead of our 70th anniversary this summer. And one name continues to pop up, someone who really helped shape what KTVB has become today. His name, Sal Soleski.
Sal was and is the greatest broadcast journalist in Idaho history. Channel 7 would not be what it is today without him.
Referred to by some as the father of Idaho journalism, Sal Soleski was first an Air Force veteran. After leaving the Air Force, he went to work as a photographer for the Idaho Transportation Department before he was hired at KTVB in the 1960s.
He was visionary. He broke stories like crazy. Those of us on the print side were always competing with Sal.
Soleski worked under General Manager Bob Kruger.
I could come down here on Saturday mornings, which I did frequently, and Soleski was always here. I mean, he was just working and working and working.
He's credited with changing the philosophy of television news at Channel 7, shifting the focus to local news. Soleski started Viewpoint in the 1960s. Today, the series is Idaho's longest-running public affairs program. He became KTVB's news director in the early 1970s.
He was the gold standard of journalism in Idaho for broadcasters.
His decisions to begin incorporating what was then considered new technology helped set the station apart from others. He also hired some pretty familiar faces.
Sal had a very unique ability to find talented people.
Sal did a tremendous job, and he went out and found the D. Sargents of the world and Carolyn Hollies, and I think he even found a guy by the name of Mark Johnson probably one time.
Soleski left the station in the 1980s and moved on to a career as a political consultant, working with both Republicans and Democrats. But he kept in contact with not only his co-workers, but other political sources over the years. To this day, some still meet weekly for coffee to catch up. In 2021, Soleski passed away at the age of 87.
We had probably 36 come back this past summer, after Sal Soleski's passing the fall before, come back for a reunion that we put together to kick off a scholarship fund at Boise State in his name, to do what we can to create opportunities to educate the next generation of Sal Soleskis.
Sal Soleski has helped shape KTVB's legacy. He also continues to help pave the way for Idaho's young journalists through a new Boise State Scholarship Fund. And this year's Sal Soleski recipient is blazing a trail for young journalists here in Idaho and at Boise State. Andrea Terez Martinez is headed to New York City to start her internship. At 5 years old, she moved to Idaho, the state she's called home ever since. She credits her family, university, and awards like Sal Soleski's for helping her get there.
It was really exciting to know that I was the first one to sort of explore what I could do with this scholarship, and for people to see what could be done with that support from KTVB.
What's next for you on that?
I'm going to be going to New York City to intern for the Wall Street Journal as a copy editor for their publishing desk. I've never been to New York. I've never been that far away from my home in Idaho before, so I'm so excited and so grateful that, they took a chance on me.
Still ahead on this special edition, how forecasting the weather has changed over the last 70 years. We're talking with Chief Meteorologist Rick Lance about what he's seen at his time at KTVB. KTVB's Chief Meteorologist Rick Lance has been on the air forecasting the Treasure Valley's weather for a long time. And over the course of his career, as you can imagine, the technology has gone through dramatic changes. Take a look.
We're going to be talking about the past 70 years here at Channel 7. I've been here for 4 decades, since 1983. This is the exact set that I started on the very first day in January of 1983. If you were watching at that time, we just had this map and a United States map. Imagine that. Only 2 maps that you could look at during the weather. They were held up by magnets, all of these different numbers, and then I changed those numbers each and every day. Now, the part of the forecast that was important is right over here. This you're looking at is a facsimile machine. This machine started out with a special ink, and it made these maps. As it pushed through, that ink, when you ripped it off, would be wet, so you'd hang it up just to dry it out. Now, the idea of this, for instance, you see satellite maps, there were surface maps, there were millibar maps. We applied that to the forecast. But basically, as we look back over the past 2 or 3 days, I would stack these maps. I would look over the satellites, look over the rest of the information, and look at the trend of the storm as it was heading our way. So it's kind of like we look backwards in order to put the forecast together. Now, what's important to know is at that time, there was a lot of room for error. And you can see why. And by the way, this jacket doesn't fit anymore. But let's move on into the future at this time. 40 years later, this is the First Alert Weather Center. As you can see, we have several high-powered computer models. Now, 40 years ago when we were talking, we only had 3 models. Now today, we have access to over 100 models, and we're putting the weather together within the minute. And here's another. It's a forecasting tool that came out in the 90s. It's known as Doppler radar. This is the first Doppler radar site in 1993. We have 155 of these around the country, 1,500 around the world. When weather's happening, we know it. Meteorologists can tell you exactly where it's raining and snowing, and the weather radar shows where and how much precipitation is falling. The waves from the radar hit anything in the path like raindrops, snowflakes, hailstones, and it's reflected back to the antenna. The radar translates the reflected beams into an image that's showing the location and the intensity of the storm. I know I've sure enjoyed using these weather changes throughout all these years, and I hope this has improved your daily planning. Our goal is accuracy and protection in the case of severe weather. And if there's any more new items coming our way, we'll be the first to let you know. Rick Lance, Idaho's News Channel 7.
Thank you so much, Rick. Yeah, it's wild just to look back at some of that old set and think about how far everything's come. Well, our special 70th celebration here at KTVB continues right after this break. Well, thank you so much for joining us for part 1 of our 70th anniversary coverage. Stay tuned for part 2.